From radical seeds come radical and revolutionary roots. The main root is the taproot. Its first direction is down. It nourishes more roots that reach out, sometimes for miles, across borders, across generations. The root systems of live oaks can communicate and share water during the tidal surge of a Category 5 hurricane. The taproot of a cypress tree grows deep enough for the other roots to spread far and wide, building networks, building systems, building inspiration for a movement built on love and collective liberation, rooted in communities on the front lines of the climate crisis, guided by indigenous wisdom, watered by frontline experience, wisdom, and strength. Rooted in a Southern culture of resistance, rooted in Black liberation. Do you feel that? Grounded in generational struggles for freedom and liberation, seeded by the ancestors before us. Taproot Earth seeds frontline formations that draw strength from each other. We cultivate the soil that grows frontline power from the Gulf South to Appalachia to the global South. We nurture the ability for our communities to rise from more severe storms, 100-year floods, and devastating fires, all part of a changing climate crisis. We envision a world where everyone can live, rest, and thrive in the place we love. If we work together, we can survive. If we move together, we can thrive. Choose now to move with us, from scarcity to abundance, from fear to love, from charity to power. Choose now to reimagine better management of natural resources. Choose now to innovate systems that govern our society in this new global reality. Choose now to fight for the planet and her people.
I hadn't seen the final version, so I know I'm sitting with artists, so let me just say peace to the folks who do that work. That is real. Peace, everyone. My name is Colette Pichon-Battle. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm so excited to be here today. As Hugh mentioned, I'm originally from Louisiana, and so I bring greetings from the land of the Choctaw Nation, and I ask for permission from and bring peace to the Tumkawa, the Comanche, the Apache of this land, the native peoples of this land. So I just want to open up with deep respect and also want to offer some love to the Carrizo Comecrujo tribe of just south of here in Texas and ask for permission to speak and be here in this place. And to my left is my business partner. Who are you? Say hello.
Hello, I'm Anthony Giancaterino, he, him, the strategy partner at Taproot Earth, and I hail from the great city of Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, also home of the Lenape people. And I'm thrilled to be here and excited to have this conversation with you all.
So we couldn't be more excited to be on the last day, early in the morning after you've partied all night. Yeah. So excited to be here. Happy to wake you up and bring you into the climate conversation. I mean, what better conversation to start with than, what's going to happen to the planet, what's happening to the planet. But we want to do this a different way. We want you to talk to us. We want to talk with you. And so for those of you who are expecting to be spoken at, we've got a little bit more for you this morning, and we're hoping you'll join with us just so we can figure this problem out together. So Anthony and I would love to first just see who's in the room. We're Southern. Well, I'm Southern. He's one of those Northerners. But Southerners, we like to know who's in the room. We like to know who we're talking to, who we're hanging out with. So we just got a couple questions. And if you can join with us, we'll see who's in the room.
So this is something you just have to raise your hand if it's a yes, and if it's not, just keep your hand down. But first, we want to get a sense, who went out to listen to music last night? Raise your hand. All right, we got a pretty good mix. All right.
That's good. That means they're sleepy.
That is true. So we'll wake you up. We'll wake you up in a little bit. The second question then is, who has never been to South by Southwest before?
Oh,
a lot of first timers on this one. All right, there you go.
Oh my gosh, y'all! I think we're in love. Like, this is our first time together. It's great. It's great.
Who hails from Texas?
All right.
Oh, so most non-Texas. All right.
All right.
We're going to broaden out a little bit. Colette is from the Mississippi watershed. I'm from the Delaware River watershed. But we want to get a sense, the Mississippi is the biggest river in this country. So who lives in a state that touches the Mississippi watershed?
Where the Mississippi watershed goes from Minnesota
all the way down to Louisiana.
all the way down. So Iowa, Wisconsin. More hands are going up. All right. We see that Mississippi watershed.
Illinois, Kansas.
Missouri.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Right. Who is not from the United States? Who's coming international?
Hey,
all right.
Bonjour.
Right.
Welcome. Bienvenue.
Very cool.
Bon
dia.
dia.
Portuguese.
Oh my gosh,
Yeah,
Portuguese.
Bon dia. Bonjour. Great. My last question, and this might be a little divisive. Who thinks technology is going to save us from this crisis? Right.
Oh.
Not
okay.
just technology.
Not
okay.
just
Okay. All right.
caveats.
Caveats.
There's some caveats
for sure.
in here.
Appreciate it.
Great. This is what you get when the artists hate the binary. The artists
true.
never want to pick that. That's fair enough. Caveats. Well, let's make this a little harder. So now we know who's in the room. We see a little bit of who's in the room. Now let's see where we are on understanding the climate crisis. So I'm gonna come at you, but let's practice. The yes to these questions would be you standing up if you're able. The no to these questions will be you making an X with your hands, so just sort of like a big X. And the maybe is you just sitting still in your chair. And some questions going to come at you. Let's try this out. This could be difficult early in the morning if you haven't had enough coffee. So here we go. Since we have a large international audience, question number 1. American football is better than global football, AKA soccer. Oh, I see opinions. American football is better than international football or soccer. No? Okay. So we've got some opinionated people in the room. Bon dia. And for those of you, this is a legitimate question for me, but the Saints are better than the Philadelphia Eagles. You know what? Thank you. My friend's from Philadelphia. I try to make this point to him all the time. He doesn't believe me. That's great. Now here, let's get a little harder with this. Borders are real. Borders are real. Depending on whose. I love it. I love the artists. Depends. Right. And let's do the technology again. The technology, and then we heard Hugh on the stage talk about AI, so all of technology. Technology will play a role in climate solutions. Yeah? All right. Excellent. I don't know if thank you very much. I don't know if you are paying attention to the border crisis here in Texas, or what they call the border crisis. Most folks have been paying attention, but I realize we have an international audience, but they're immigrants moving in and out of the border. And most people don't know that this is not just an immigration challenge. This is a climate challenge. And we want to talk a little bit about that. I think we might have some slides on this one. What's interesting is that my background is in immigration law. And when I first started this work after Hurricane Katrina, I had a very weird sort of background. I understood business and immigration law, but we were watching the movement of people in and across borders. So in the United States, they might call them internally displaced people. And then folks were being brought into the United States for cleanup and recovery. And they were coming in lawfully, coming in through companies, but those folks were brought in, and those were migrant workers. And so what you were watching during that time were people moving across the border. What do we have here, Anthony?
So this actually is just looking first at the U.S., and this was just last year, of adults displaced by disasters in 2022. And so, as we know, a lot of times in disasters, in the first week, huge amount of displacement, and then people often try to come back home. But the thing that really sticks out is not returned by year's end, that's still almost 600,000 people. And that's just within the U.S.
So that's 1 year after a
1
disaster.
year after disaster.
How many did not return?
600,000.
600,000 did not return.
And you think there's more than just one disaster that happens year on, year on, year on. There are people who have still not returned from Katrina.
Indeed.
Almost 20 years later.
Yeah. We're at year 19, by the way, since Hurricane Katrina. And one of the realities that folks often ask me, how's New Orleans? How are things? Are we back? And the buildings are back, many of them. And even a lot of the culture has changed. But that has changed mostly because we have a significant number of people who were never able to come back home. And we don't talk about them because the population returned, but it wasn't the same population. The numbers were the same, but it wasn't the same people. And this is one of those invisible conversations of the climate crisis, because we really see and understand Katrina as a climate disaster. It was an extreme storm, and the climate crisis will have us experiencing more extreme weather, and this was really just the beginning. So we're learning lessons from, what we're actually seeing on the ground.
And this is what it looks like globally by 2050. That estimates of global displacement and migration by 2050. Does anyone just see which continent or regions are most impacted? You can yell it out. Yeah.
Uh-huh.
Sub-Saharan Africa,
Yeah.
East Asia and the South Pacific, Southeast Asia, North Africa, Latin America, but also Europe is in there as well. Mm-hmm. So the point here shows this is a map that's saying if we do everything we can, a quote-unquote climate-friendly scenario, that's the purple, you still will have disasters. You will still have displacement and migration. We've been having them prior to the climate crisis taking off. But if we don't do anything about it and we do very little, look how much higher that is. Significantly higher. And it's all hitting mostly the continent of Africa first, worst, and hardest. Mm-hmm. But we're all impacted by that, both on having to leave, whether it's from New Orleans, having to move up. One of the conversations we'll get into a little bit today is how did a kid from Philly connect with someone from Slidell, Louisiana, because those are not two cities that usually connect very often. But part of this conversation is we understood the map between the Gulf South to Appalachia. That is where people move when they get displaced from storms. They move up into Appalachia, into the region where there's mountains because there's fresh water, there's lands, there's opportunities. And so we saw a lot of folks migrating up just within the U.S. after disasters into Pennsylvania, coming up from North Carolina into Pennsylvania. So there's the connection there. But when we broaden it out at the border, it's not the border crisis that we're seeing is rooted in people's ability to govern lands. Do they have access to farm? What is happening to their crops? Have trade agreements come and set up and people have lost their ability to do multi-crop farming and they're into monoculture farming. It's related to access to water. Who has access to clean and healthy water? It's related to people's ability to perform in their economies. It's related to people having access to a healthy, fair, and sustainable democracy. For decades of U.S. investment or disinvestment or investment in militarization during the Cold War and post, a lot of El Salvador, Latin America, South America, all impacts we're feeling now because people have lost their ability to have governance, they've lost their ability to access land, they've lost their ability to have access to water in free and fair ways that allow them to be part of a community. Yeah. So they're moving up. But they don't come to the U.S. being received as people who have gone through crisis, they're being seen as people who are creating terror.
Yeah. And so this is complicated. This is touching lots of issues. And this is a conversation we like to have with friends who are hearing that the climate crisis is just about reducing greenhouse gases. And it is about reducing greenhouse gases. But the crisis part of this conversation touches way more than invisible gases that will in the future be emitted. That's a very small part of this understanding. But let me challenge you a little bit with a couple more questions. You know, when I go to some states, this question will get me in trouble, but let's see how far I can get in Texas. Okay, so this is the yes, no, maybe again. If it's yes, stand up. If it's no, hold up an X. And if it's maybe, just sit in your seats and still. Okay, big question. The climate crisis is real. All right. Whew. Okay, great. We can have the rest of this conversation. And thank you. You'll be surprised. That is not always the response in rooms. In places like Florida, They were banned from saying the word climate in their legislation, in their legal documents, banned by the governor from even saying it. So as they were assessing impacts, they couldn't say the word. It's being banned all over again in many places, including Louisiana, where we're starting to see our new governor take it out of language. And so this is going to be difficult because we are in a situation and our legislators, our leaders, are actually not allowing people to tell the truth. In fact, climate change, the word itself, is not the word that we're supposed to be using. We were supposed to be using global warming. But they said that word scared people into action. We need a more benign word so that people kind of like hear a word but don't react to it. So we say climate change. That actually comes from the conservative side of our political system so that people won't react. Because when especially Americans were hearing global warming, they thought it was something to be concerned about and that we needed to act on, and they did not want that. And so this is what we're up against. There's not just a climate crisis. There's a political crisis and a political moment happening that we have to be aware of. And if you're not connected to the right information, you won't know that you're in the middle of a storm. One more question.
I was going to say, who funded that global warming language?
Oh, see, we are nonpartisan here at South by Southwest.
This isn't partisan.
I don't know who funded it. Some people who don't deserve all the money. Who funded
Maybe
it?
Shell.
Oh, was it?
BP.
Yeah.
ExxonMobil.
I'm gonna need a cupcake. I'm gonna need a cupcake. Here's a question. Another tough one. The crisis in Palestine right now has nothing to do with the climate crisis. Yes, no, maybe so. No. Yes. That took courage, yeses. Thank you. There are some things to know about that crisis. Another complicated conversation. There are politics to talk about, and that will require whiskey in a bar later. We can do that. But before we get to that, here's what we know. The water in Palestine, access to water, was being controlled by an outside party. The people of Palestine did not have access to their own water. The land that the people were on, their sovereignty to be in their place, was being challenged. Like any other sovereignty fight, we are not just looking at a political situation. What we're starting to see when it comes to war and conflict is a deep connection to the climate crisis and the access and the ability to steward your own natural resources. I live in a place that is wet and rainy and full of water. So I don't know what it is to live in a place where water is scarce. But if I did live in a place where water was scarce and there were people holding or systems holding that water back, it would increase desperation. It would increase tension. And this is not just happening in Palestine. This is happening in a lot of places. We will see that even when we get to the Amazon, who has a right to their land? The indigenous people who have protected the forest for years are being stopped from entering their land. Water that has been flowing for generations is being stopped by systems, and it's getting hotter. The global temperatures are increasing. What do people do when that kind of pressure comes on you? We have to be careful. I know, I recognize that we have to be careful, but we also cannot miss these connections to what's happening around the planet, because the other product of climate change will be conflict. It will be war. We're thinking it's just going to be hurricanes and fires, because that's what you're being told. This is about an environmental, natural disaster that we couldn't control. But the climate crisis is about much more. And we're going to all have to get more savvy in understanding the intersections and the impacts on humanity and our political systems and our social systems to boot.
And I just want to say, as a Taproot Earth, while we are rooted in the Gulf South and work through Appalachia, as the video shows, we're connecting with the global South. And we've had the deep honor to be working with leaders from the Congo, Ethiopia, Gambia, Kenya, as well as Brazil and the Caribbean, Nigeria, Ghana. And one of the things that's been an interesting through line is talking about what is happening in communities around war and violence, and in particular over resources. So in the Congo, everyone is now going to the Congo because that is resource rich. The Congo is resource rich on lithium, on raw earth materials and mining that supplies batteries for these EV vehicles. So all the technological electric vehicles, EVs, so the technologies that we need, right? Because that is true, we do need technology in this as a solution, but where is it coming from?
So let's break that down.
Sure.
The solutions that we are being told for the climate crisis: more solar panels, electric vehicles, stop printing and go digital. The source material inside of these machines is coming from mostly Africa, mostly South America, sometimes China. We're getting silicate after mining it to build solar panels. We're getting cobalt and lithium inside of your phones, and your phones are being built to last how long? 2 years, honey. You're paying all of that money for a 2-year phone because they're coming out with the next one, and you know you want to get it. But every time we get a new phone, there's a new battery. The electric vehicles have even bigger batteries. The machines needed to run energy will have even bigger batteries. And all of those raw materials are being sourced from places like the Congo. And they're causing conflict. Mm-hmm. It is the new conflict material. It is, in some ways, a new round of colonization. And what's happening is that it's rare earth minerals, but also forests, also rivers. And countries that have high levels of debt and poverty are being offered to be cleared of debt, to come out of poverty in exchange for their forest, in exchange for their lithium, in exchange for the rights of their seabeds. This is a problem because it's the good guys often pushing that green energy. But we don't really have a solution to how we create a better life without extracting and taking, without doing what we did many hundreds of years ago at the very beginning of this country. We are still extracting. We are still colonizing. We are still oppressing. You don't get a new economic sector without oppressing people. And we have to know, when we get our materials, who paid the price. We can't engage in this climate crisis without being really honest about that. Yeah. So these are some pillars of climate justice for Taproot, and we'll talk a little bit more about Taproot in just a second, but we have 6 pillars because we want regular folks to have regular conversations about this global challenge. The 6 pillars are simple. They are water, energy, and land. These are the things we need to live and survive. If you're human, and I know there might be some AI persons in here, but the human people, this is what we need. We need water, we need energy, we need land. We need this to survive.
That's right. And then labor, economy, and democracy are the systems we use to govern these things that we need to survive. It's how do we work the earth? How do we build an economy where people can live and trade? It doesn't have to be through money, but it is this idea of how do we trade resources with each other to survive? And then democracy being how do we govern? How do we make decisions? Are we all about privatization of these resources and then whoever gets it first gets to hold on to it? Or are we thinking about it in the sense of we could all collectively steward this land, hearkening back to many more indigenous traditions and cultures? So these are the way we look at this. And so when we see, for example, the increase and the rise in global fascism that's been happening, and authoritarianism, what does that mean for people's ability to farm, be able to produce food for their families, to be able to have access to water or not? And we see these things as deeply connected. How do we build the economy? Is it extractive? So even if we have all of the best technological solutions, if it's still extracting from the few and leaving the rest underneath, is that really the economy we need to be building in this climate crisis? And the labor is how do we actually value work and how do we redefine work? Mm-hmm. Even the AI, we were talking about AI earlier, there was a message that AI is great because that means people don't have to do certain jobs. Could be, but are they being paid and resourced to live or are they just forgotten and abandoned? Because then that's also not the solution. So we enter into this in very different ways with our communities, and people always get to climate coming through different doors.
That's right. And speaking of coming through different doors, Anthony and I came through two different doors. As I mentioned, as was said in my bio, I was in corporate law in 2005. And in August 2005, Hurricane Katrina hit the Gulf Coast. It hit Mississippi, it hit Alabama, and it devastated Louisiana. And my community, Bayou Liberty, was under 8 feet of water. There was a 30-foot tidal surge off the Gulf. When you think about that volume of water, you have to understand that when the water goes out, there is nothing left. It's a full destruction. And it was a difficult moment because you could feel everything leave. It was gone. It was destroyed. But some things remained. I remember now which trees stood, because we lost a lot of trees in that flood. I remember which trees stood. And I remember who stayed and who left. And I also remember who got to come back. I started asking questions. As a lawyer, my job is to pretty much poke whoever I'm sitting across the table from and just, check the argument. And so with the laws that I saw being put in place after disaster, I was curious as to why a law that applied to everybody had different results on different people. And let me be clear. The folks who were receiving different results, lesser results, were always Black, poor, anyone who was rural. This group of people, rural, poor, Black, indigenous, we were having problems with the system working for us, but the system worked for others. How could that be? If a law is being applied across the board, that you shouldn't see that. You should see, you'll see mistakes, but you should see them across the board. You shouldn't see like one group of people having a problem. I also saw this in BP, the BP oil drilling disaster that happened 5 years later. Who was recovering? The commercial fishermen, many of whom were white and had big fleets, were recovering. The indigenous and Vietnamese fisherfolk who were small were not recovering. The Black oystermen were not recovering. Literally just being a lawyer for them on their paper made them reconsider the application, and all of a sudden they were getting paid. But when they didn't have a lawyer representing them, they weren't. And why? Why was this happening? This, for me, was something that kept me up at night. How do we have these laws that have such different results for people? That's a question that I had to ask myself over and over again. In that recovery process, I met this strange bird from Philly. And we began really kind of talking about our realities. I was seeing one reality in disaster. What were you seeing in Philadelphia?
Yeah, so I've got three daughters, and they go to the Philly public school system. And it's a great school system, but it's deeply underfunded, as I've learned pretty much most city school systems are in the U.S. But it's also not just about the education; it's about the buildings. And over time,
the physical buildings.
We would get letters every week or two: mold, asbestos, lead remediation happening. We have to stay home. This is before COVID, so even you had to do virtual school before COVID.
So wait, you have white children who are having problems with buildings?
White children having problems with buildings.
How does that work? Because they're going
to the public school system. And the Philly is it's not a majority Black city, but it's a plurality Black city. It's 48% Black, 46% white. And so most people who have resources can choose to send their kids to the public school, or they can send them to private schools. So our kids are going to the public school, and that's the reality. So when we had that big wildfire from Canada that came in, so I live in Mount Airy, Philadelphia. It's a lot of woods. So we have the best air quality in the city all around. Also temperatures, when it's really hot, it's 10 degrees cooler in our neighborhood than in North Philly, which is 99% Black. No trees, a lot worse impacts on communities. Where we live, it's multiracial, multi-class. We have trees, and there's actually relatively coolness in the summer. That wildfire smoke came, and our neighborhood was the worst air quality in the world. Not just in Philly, not just the U.S. Worse than Beijing, worse than New Delhi, worse than anywhere. Because it just sat. That plus the other, just the other chemicals that were happening in the refinery around the area. So it just sat. we got a message from the school saying we have to keep the windows closed because the air quality is so bad. This is 2 weeks after we had a message from the school. There's major asbestos exposure in the classrooms.
So it's toxic inside.
So toxic inside and toxic outside.
Wow.
It's like, what do we do? Now, thankfully, I'm white, if you haven't noticed by now.
We noticed.
And so I have benefited from a lot of these systems, and we have resources, and we are able to work from home and have our kids do the virtual school and take care of that. I don't have to work in an hourly wage job. There are a lot of families that were stuck. They couldn't do anything. They couldn't send their kids to school because air quality was bad outside. They couldn't be outside. Couldn't be inside because of the asbestos issue. Had to be virtual. Who has access to technology?
Yeah.
Who can stay home and take off from work or be with their kids during that time? Deep disparities. Now, our kids were impacted by this, but they still had it better than their neighbors and their friends who are black, whose parents may or may not have had a job that could allow them to stay home.
And so now we're getting into the title of this conversation. What does black liberation have to do with climate justice? I'm hoping some of you were at least pondering that question. How could that possibly be connected? The truth is when you understand the realities of black people, not just in the U.S., but globally, you will understand and get to the root causes of the climate crisis. It is the philosophy of extraction that we are up against. It is literally a system of oppression that we are up against. We are being told greenhouse gases. And again, we have to handle that. But solutions that have us extracting from the Congo and just consuming more means we haven't actually addressed the system. We are the largest consumer, Americans. We are driving the global climate crisis. We want to do recycling and we want to do really good garden projects, but the world actually needs Americans to consume less. And what do? Yes, clapping. Yes. Some radical artists in here. I see it. I mean, it's crazy because when I went to the climate talks and we were represented by the United States Department of State and John Kerry, former Senator John Kerry, his statement was the American way of life is not up for discussion. And that is how we're being represented in the international realm. We're not going to talk about why and how Americans need to consume less. Instead, let's talk about how we build electric vehicles, how we build more wind turbines, but we are not going to talk about how Americans consume less. One American consumes as much energy as 370 people in Ethiopia. 370 people in Ethiopia. And here's the kicker. The conversation right now, it is a talking point on the conservative side, is about population control. Anybody heard this? We have too many people on the planet. We must control the population. What population do y'all think they're talking about? Well, they're not talking about the American population for whom, if you stopped one American from consuming, you could let 370 Ethiopians live their life. No, what we're talking about is how to control black and brown female bodies. And so many of you haven't even put together that the reproductive justice fight is part of the climate conversation. And some of you haven't understood that the criminal justice fight is part of the climate conversation. But if you don't understand that, then you don't understand yet that black liberation gets us to a solution. It is black and brown bodies that we are sacrificing, devaluing, and experimenting on still. This is not new. I do not live in this country because I chose to be here. I am a product of extraction. I'm a product of extraction. There are whole communities that were extracted from Africa, brought here, and brought to work for no wages and a legal stripping of their humanity. And I always wondered, how did like humans let slavery happen? You ever wondered about that? I mean, if I was living during slavery times, I would have fought against that. Don't y'all? I mean, I feel like I'm with some people who would have fought against it with me. But it was a moment like this. It was a moment just like this, where we did not have the courage to care about what was happening across another border, where we did not have the courage to call out wrong when wrong was just wrong. When we put our comfort and profit above humanity and people, that's when slavery happened. And it kept going for hundreds of years. It didn't happen and then stop. You let a system like that take root, it's very difficult to stop it. And that is the moment we're in, and I'm telling you from the bottom of my heart, it is time for each and every one of you to engage in this climate fight, because this is not just about invisible gases that will be emitted in the future. This is about reproductive justice. This is about queer liberation. This is about everything you hold dear about that place you love. This is about Black liberation. If you help, if you engage, if Black people get free, we will have tackled the systems that enslaved us in the first place. And when you tackle those systems, you realize they didn't just enslave us. Racism doesn't just hurt Black people, y'all. We're all harmed by it. His children ain't Black. They just go to a school where Black people go. And they can't breathe inside or outside. This is not just something that's going to harm that group over there that you don't care too much about. This one, when it goes awry, it will harm everyone, including you, including the places you love. It's important for us to pay attention to who's driving and what's driving this accelerated climate crisis. Yeah, and I don't know if we wanted to talk a little bit about fossil fuels, but we're in Texas. I mean let's take them on. Let's take them on.
Yeah, I mean, that is part of our connection as well, as we've talked about the connections with the Gulf South and Appalachia, and there's a reason for that, because they practiced extraction and how to do it with coal and oil in Pennsylvania. And then they went to Kentucky, and they went all the way down to Mississippi and Louisiana and Texas. And what has also brought us together over the last 15 plus years is seeing that connection and seeing that instead of responding to this region-to-region approach where you're seeing fossil fuel companies working with each other to like go to the next thing, if we can't frack here, we'll just go across the border to the next state and frack here. If we can't frack here, we'll go to the next border.
And frack is hydrofracking, hydraulic fracking, where we shove water into the ground and gas comes out. So this is how we produce fossil gas.
So, but the movement's not building against that. It's just state-by-state policies. Well, these fossil fuel companies are multinational. What they're doing here in the Gulf South and Appalachia, they're also doing in Tanzania and Kenya on pipelines. The same company, Scotland, Nigeria, Ireland, the same company financing the pipeline in Kenya and Tanzania is the same company financing the pipeline across the Carrizo-Comecrudo tribe in Texas. So if we're going to think about how do we go deep at the root of this system and take on something that is as massive as a giant oak tree, we also have to have really strong roots, and we have to also be as big as that, but not vertically, but wide. And so I'm just going to transition a little bit to about Taproot Earth.
And I'm going to let you go there, and let me just take one shot at the oil and gas company, since he's so nice. Let me go with it. Here's my statement, and I want you to know I'm a daughter of oil and gas. My dad worked in the oil and gas industry. It's what happens when you live in South Louisiana. Pretty much everybody you know is somehow touching that industry. I suspect it's the same for coal in Appalachia, et cetera. This is not about demonizing the past. This is about declaring when enough is enough. So we have things. We have enough oil and gas reserves to actually get us through a technology transition. We don't have to drill anymore. We really don't. The only thing we're doing now is drilling to fulfill the futures market. So this is a financial investing market that says we believe we're going to drill this much oil in 20 years. So that's all we're fulfilling now. We don't need it. We're just making profit margins for the companies. The fossil fuel industry is accelerating the climate crisis beyond what anybody could have ever imagined. We are still drilling and fracking for oil and gas and coal at a level that it's bringing those greenhouse gases to places we've never seen them before. We got this information a decade, 2 decades ago. And over the last 5 years where we've really engaged as a country around the climate crisis, we have not lowered production, we've increased it. We have not lowered greenhouse gases, which we must do. We do not survive if we don't lower the greenhouse gas emissions. We have increased them. We have not lowered our consumption, we have increased it. And all of this is for the profit of about 6 companies, of about 18 people. And the global wealth divide right now is unlike anything we have ever seen. We have billionaires who could spend $1 million every day for the rest of their life and still die very wealthy. While we have folks who cannot find water, who do not have access to food. This is not just about drilling. This is about what the drilling creates and that imbalance in society. The fossil fuel industry is what we have to stop first. We cannot have any more drilling. We cannot have any more fracking. This is a non-negotiable. And if you are with us, you have to be able to say that. We have to be courageous because many of us depend on these things. Where am I going to get my gas? How am I going to travel to all the places I want to see? We have enough. We have enough. If we continue now, we will be writing our own ending, and it will not be a good one. It's going to be one where we wish we would have taken different steps. Fossil fuel extraction has to stop. The philosophy of extraction has to be challenged and dismantled everywhere, and it is not just extracting gas and oil from a place. It is extracting people. It is extracting culture. It is extracting value without restoration. This leaves a hole. This leaves an indention. This leaves deficiency. And that's what we're feeling right now. We've got to have a more sophisticated analysis, and we've got to get clear on the root cause. The root cause is the philosophy of extraction. The industry we have to stop first is fossil fuels, but that's not the only one. We got to tackle many, and that's what Taproot is here to do.
So we have one more question for y'all in a second. But I'm just going to go to the next slide real quick. So Taproot Earth, we were founded in 2 years ago. I don't know, I'm losing time. 2 years ago.
What is time?
But we're only existing until 2030. So we are purposefully and intentionally sunsetting as an organization. We're around till 2030. Does anyone know why that date means anything? 2030?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, that's right. The UN reports say that is the end of the world, basically. They said if we don't make catastrophic shifts, there will be catastrophic damage. And so we saw that, and we're in all these meetings and conversations, and we're just like, well, what is the solution? We're thinking too small. We're not building across borders. We're not connecting Gulf, Appalachia, Global South. That is not happening at a deep enough pace, at a deep enough route, and at a scaled out pace that you can see solutions replicate. So we created Taproot Earth to be a movement vehicle, a piece of infrastructure that can take on the fossil fuel industry. We know we'll never have the same amount of money. We'll never have the same stature, just as an organization. But we will if we build with communities across the globe. And so for us, our starting point is everyone deserves to be able to live, rest, and thrive in the places they love. Everybody. There is enough for all of us to have what we need to be able to live on this planet. And if we do that, and if we don't practice extraction, but we practice abundance, and we practice how to collectively move together, you can actually address the climate crisis because we make different decisions. It's not about one having an enclosure, taking land from another just to profit. That goes out the window if you have a different philosophy, and how do we actually act on that? So for us to get there, we're not going to get there all in the next year or two, but we've got to be able to build power. We've got to cultivate solutions so that people see it's possible. And these solutions coming from the frontline communities that we were just talking about, those most impacted, who've experienced the challenges and the hardships, also have a lot of wisdom. So much of the narrative that we see around the climate crisis is also very much a narrative of victimization. And that's also not what we're trying to do. We're pointing out, here's the systemic flaws, here's how people are impacted, but people have power. People have ingenuity. People have creativity. You can create art and music out of anything. You don't need the highest piano, the highest priced piano to do piano. You can learn different things, right? So this is about how do we support communities' ability, their vision, their solutions, and how do we connect that and see how it can be replicated. What can work in Pennsylvania? What can work in Louisiana? There'll be tweaks because there's different cultures, there's different systems, but the idea could be the same. And how do we replicate that through? So our vision for this is 2030 is not the moment of despair and the end of the world. It could be. It could be. But if you notice in that video, it said 2030, point of no return, and it crossed out and it had liberation horizon come up. And that is our perspective of possibility. So we look at 2030, we acknowledge the reality that is in front of us, but we eschew that that is the end goal that's going to happen. And for us to do that, we've got to pivot. And look, if we think about abundance, the horizon is all across this room. If we're all just staring here, of course we're going to go straight to the back. But if we just pivot and look this way, we can go to a different spot. If we pivot and look that way, we can go to a different spot. There are possibilities. And for us, the liberation horizon is about helping everyone see what is the possibility that they can move. How can they be deeply rooted in their community? How can they engage with each other to learn how do you actually share resources? What are the models that we can build on? What do we need to build power to take on the fossil fuel industry? How can we be more creative? And then how do we actually implement that? What is it going to take to implement that? And so our liberation horizon concept that we move and organize with is helping the people see, yes, you've got to fight against all these terrible things. We've got to address them. That needs to happen. And we've got to be able to build up enough capacity to be able to pivot and say, this is where we want to go. Because if we don't, we're just going to replicate the same system in just a new economy, but it's going to be the same systems at play. And that's what we're trying to shift.
Yeah. Systems change, y'all. Systems change. So recycling the plastic that we continue to buy, that's not a systems change. You actually have to stop buying the plastic. And by the way, why can't you just drink water out of your faucet? And when did you need money to access water? And why aren't we asking that question? Why do you have to have resources to access the very thing that gives you life? And we're addicted not to the water, to the plastic bottle. We're addicted to convenience. We're addicted to comfort. And we are causing a global imbalance. We, all of us, the American way of life. And we're exporting that way of life into other countries. This is the standard. This is the gold standard. Go somewhere, buy some land, own something, and claim it as though you have that right. We should be questioning ownership and really considering stewardship. Not because you don't deserve your house, but because that concept of ownership, along with the philosophy of extraction, ended with slavery. That's the conclusion. And look at us. We want to build power. We want to be secure. What does that mean? It means get more, hoard more, take more, preserve more for yourself. That's what the conservation movement said about land. Put a fence around it. Only use it when you need it. It's yours. You can own it. The indigenous people had no concept of putting a fence around grass and saying it's yours. What are you talking about? In fact, the Comanche and Apache of this land, the Carrizo of this land, they moved all the time. Because movement across any border, man-made or natural, is a human right. It's a human right. And when you are stopped from moving, when you are stopped from living, when you are stopped from being who you are, your human rights are being taken away. This climate crisis is not just about invisible gases and future emissions. This is about the way we live. This is about our society. This is about our moral standards. And it starts with who has access to water, because water is life. So when we don't think these conflicts have anything to do with the climate crisis, we have to rethink what's happening. When people's lives are threatened anywhere, they will fight. You want to know why? Because that's what we do as humans. Well, let me tell all of you something. Our lives are being threatened. They're being threatened by a capitalist system that says take until you don't want to take anymore. Take without any care or consequence of your action. Take, hold for yourself, indulge in a feeling of security that you will never get alone, and you only get when you are in community. The solutions here are for us to build more community, for us to really dig down in the places we love. What do we love about these places? They are in danger. They are threatening that really wonderful tree that you love, that piece of water that you love. They are threatening. We are being threatened, and it's time for us to really come together. I saw something pop up. What was that? Questions? Woo. Okay. Somebody in the interwebs is wanting to talk to us. I don't know what's happening. It's an important piece of this conversation, y'all, that we can't let you walk away from Taproot and think that the climate crisis is just about mitigating greenhouse gases. This is a bigger challenge, but it's also a bigger opportunity. We could be our best selves by 2030. What happens if we collectivize to go a level higher by 2030? We don't have to let this be the fate. We can change it. We have that power. And in fact, the entire world is waiting for the U.S. public to get it together and to start doing things that will benefit the planet.
So we wanted to, oh, great, someone's already on this.
Yes.
Awesome.
Oh.
So we wanted to ground this as we kind of come to our close.
They did have high technology marks in
true.
this audience. Yes.
So if anyone has not used Mentimeter, you can go to menti.com, and then you just type in that code 4980-0049. And this is what we're asking. It's like, what do you love most about your place you live? What do you love most about the place you live? And we just want to see, so family, nature.
What do you love most
love?
about Philly?
Well, there's a lot I love about Philly.
You
But
love-
about the neighborhood I live in, I love that we can get into the woods within like 3 seconds. And
You don't love the Philly cheesesteak?
Well, it's actually, the roast pork is a better sandwich.
You know what?
But I love my sports. I do love the culture of Philadelphia sports, and people can make fun of us all they want, but it connects people across all different
We
identities.
call
in that
those
city.
fanatics.
There we are.
That's what
It
we
is the
call
city
them.
of fanatics.
Look what's coming in.
But we got culture, family,
A
trees,
beach.
lakes,
Art. Ooh, sunsets.
Ooh, the beach in Rio de Janeiro.
Somebody said fewer
Yeah,
people.
fewer-
That's just better.
the quiet on that end.
Barton Springs. Shout out. Clean water. Mountains. Lakes, rivers, green.
So these are the things that we want to save. These are why we're in this work. And everyone should be able to contribute to this. And that is a fundamental belief for us. And so I know we're coming to time, but do you want to ask the
What was the last question?
the last one around possible? We call it.
Oh, yeah, you do
Okay,
that.
great. So, keeping these in mind, we want you to think about this. Think about the answer you put in. And then here's our challenge to you, kind of our call to action to you, is think about 2 people that you could have dinner with. Think about...
Okay, pause right there.
Yep.
Think about 2 people you can have dinner with. Just pause. Just get them in your head. You got them? Think about them. You got to have 2. It's not going to work if you don't get them in your head. 2 people. Mamas do count and kids count. Okay, 2 people. They got them, Anthony.
2 people. And you'll have a conversation about what is it that you love most about the place that you live.
Well, how you going to get them in the door?
Oh, you have to invite them for dinner.
You got to
Or
make what they want to eat.
Make what they want to eat. Well, I don't know if they come to my house, they're getting. I'm just saying.
They're going to eat what you. They're going to eat what you made.
They're gonna eat what I
Okay,
make. But
okay.
think of a nice meal, what to drink, and setting the table for a conversation around what is it that you love about that place, the place that you call home, or the place that you choose to be home, or a place that is just very sacred to you.
So we're having dinner, and all I have to do is ask them, what do they love about the place they call home?
That's right.
Okay.
Then it's gonna get a little bit trickier. I want you to then ask each person, what is stopping us from protecting these things that we love?
That's going to be a hard conversation if you get that one uncle. Okay.
Is it
Y'all know
money?
the one I'm talking about.
Is it comfort? Is it not wanting to face truth? Like, those are tough questions. This is our family. This would be a very tough question.
Yeah.
And then the third thing is, because we don't end at the problem, we always end with the solution. The third thing is, what would the 3 of you do together to address that challenge to protect what you love or to save what you love?
Word up.
What would you do together? And we want to actually hear from you all.
What
So-
do you love? What's the challenge? And what
then
would you do together? Okay.
Because that's how you build community.
Okay.
Those 3 folks, that's enough to build a community. And if you can do that, we want you to do this. And we're going to ask you to tag us at Taproot Earth when you've done it with
So
what
on
you
the
will
socials?
do. On the socials.
On the socials, when you've got your 3, after you've had your dinner,
Mm-hmm.
and after y'all had that hard conversation with that one uncle, then call us
That's right.
on the interwebs.
And then we'll follow up.
And they're tagging
They're tagging at Taproot Earth, hashtag We Choose Now.
tagging at Taproot Earth, hashtag We Choose Now. We want to thank y'all so much for joining us this morning. Thank you for this time. Appreciate you. Thank you.